thank you all for being here today. We're really excited to share with you about the REST program. To kick us off, we have our director at ARPA-H, Alicia Jackson. I'll let her come up and give a few remarks to get us going. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. I was just telling Glenn, the director of the Proactive Health Office, that we've now trashed your summer vacation. But I know you're going to have a ton of fun actually working on REST, working on the proposals, grabbing us your best ideas. It's such a pleasure to see all of you here, a very full room. This is awesome. It's the number one thing we want to see for our programs is not only do we want to see an incredible program idea, but we want to see really the ideas that are coming from each and every one of you. It's one thing to put a vision out there, but at ARPA-H, we don't do the work. Our whole job is to go find the best minds, the best ideas from across the world and bring those together so we can work as a team to achieve the mission. I'm very lucky to be here. I was lucky enough to work at ARPA-H and now I'm I was very lucky to work at DARPA for several years. And I always said if I were to come back to the federal government, it would have to be for an ARPA. And I'm really, really thrilled to be here. And I'm really thrilled to be part of this agency because I think it's doing some of the most exciting science and technology that's out there today in the healthcare space. We have a lot of challenges facing us across the United States and across the world when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to medicines. We have three major priorities at ARPA-H. The first one is winning the biotech race. I don't think it's escaped anyone's attention that we're really starting to see a shifting tide here in the United States, where we were once the undisputed innovative biomedical leader, and that started to become less and less true. We see other nations really building incredible technologies and capabilities and moving ahead when we think about things like clinical trials in all spaces. However, it's not that we don't want other nations building technology, but what we're starting to see here is an outflow of capital from the United States. And that's not great. And so a huge thing that we think about is how do we really supercharge and ensure that we're staying at the front of that innovation? How do we make sure that we're at the leading edge? And that's something we at ARPA-H can do, which is really take those ideas that are just at the edge of possibility and bring people together to go after them to show not just what's possible, but what we can make true. Our agency doesn't just focus on being able to publish papers. That's great, but that's a side effect of the work that we do. Our entire job, our entire mission is to take those ideas, those ones that have just maybe been proven out in a lab, or just an idea in someone's head and actually translate that into reality. That's a much, much harder job to do, especially in the healthcare space. But it's why our work is so meaningful, because instead of having to wait 20 years, 30 years from idea to actually impacting a human being, we can make that happen in a much faster time frame. In fact, that is our remit. That is our entire mission here, is to figure out how we can move from that idea, from that first proof of concept, all the way to actually touching someone's life and being able to make them healthier and live longer. I was thrilled when I came to ARPA-H and I learned that Nate had this gem of an idea in his head. Really starting to think about what if we totally think about sleep differently and how we modulate it and how we impact it. I'm sure no one in this room has ever suffered from a poor night's sleep or multiple poor nights sleep and understands the impact that it has on your health and your well-being in your lives. I know many of us have tried different types of sleep interventions. Some of those work better for some people than others. Some of them have durability, but many of them don't, especially for most people, they don't have durability. And in fact, many of the interventions, especially pharmaceutical, that we thought would help us get better sleep turn out not to be so great for our brains or for our health. And so we need different solutions. And I think Nate's real insight here, really understanding that this 60-year-old technology that tells me if I got enough REM, enough deep sleep, enough light sleep, enough total sleep, my time to fall asleep, actually isn't telling me how much quality sleep I am actually getting. And so this whole idea of why don't we figure out how to measure that, not just in a sleep lab, but really so every person can measure that at home and understand it, is first very, very important. But then second, what are the technologies we can do to be able to impact those proactively, responsively, while you're actually sleeping? And that's the really bold idea here, which is not only just flipping how we understand sleep on its head, but really starting to understand how can we actually modulate that while you're sleeping? And when you think about that, it's just incredible. Not only can we impact how we feel, but we can actually impact our brain health. And we're definitely in a realm today where as people are living longer and longer, what we're understanding is no longer our hearts killing us so much, but really our brains are now the ones that we see aging the most. And any impact we can have on keeping our brains healthy and keeping our bodies healthy is just going to be phenomenal if we can do that. I'm so glad you all are here. Buckle up if you've never worked with ARPA-H before. It's going to be an intense process. We're going to move really quickly, but I can promise you it's going to be well worth it. You get to work not only with the incredible team that Nate has, Glenn, the office director, his incredible team of CETAs and support staff. You're all on the same team together when you join the REST program. We're here to ensure that you're going to be successful, but you have to bring it. You have to bring really tough, bold ideas, things that are going to seem very, very challenging. Please let us know what you find challenging and how you plan to address it. That's so key to how we run our programs. We want to go after the hardest problems and we want to go after them fast and early. And we're going to make sure you have the funding in order to be able to do that. One of my favorite things about ARPA-H is we can actually fund teams to the degree to actually give you focus and time. That's really rare. We don't want you sitting around writing how many grants for $250K. That's not interesting to us. What's interesting is getting your full effort on this and making sure you have the funding and the focus to be able to do it. We're going to push you very hard. You are totally up to that challenge. Unfortunately, you might not have been asked to do that before, but we're going to ask you to do it. I had the pleasure, and I know what it's like to work on a program out of an ARPA that does turn from something that's in the lab to actually deployed capability in 5 years or less. I got to do that multiple times, and there's nothing more invigorating than being able to see your technology out in the world. Somebody who actually cares, not if you published a paper, but if you actually changed a life. That's why we're here. That's why you're here, and that's why I'm here. We're simply here to be able to change lives and change them for the better. With that, I'm going to wrap up. I think we have Glenn Coppersmith, the fearless leader of the Proactive Health Office, who's going to give some remarks. Thank you all for being here. It's really a pleasure. Again, sorry for maybe tanking some of your summer vacation plans, but I promise you being here and being part of this program is going to be far greater.
So Alicia's told you a bunch of really interesting and wonderful things here about the things in which we're trying to do. My job is to tell you how we're going to do some of that, just a little bit, and particularly how it's relevant for you and for the applications here. So there's tons of slides you can read about. If you guys don't know who ARPA-H is yet, that's interesting how you found your way into this room. We can discuss that one later. The thing that I want to really focus here on is that we do take on these gigantic challenges. This is built in the spirit of DARPA and looking at these amazing things that were able to be done. Each of these is nothing short of miraculous, and they're the result of compounding other miracles. And so how do we actually manifest that? How do we create that is really the core of the ARPA model. And so there's two key components here on this slide. You don't have to read everything, I promise. The first and foremost piece of this is that you have a program manager that wants to do this, that they have a great idea that they want to bring to fruition, and that they're relentless, and that they're willing to walk through any barriers that are going to prevent that vision from coming to fruition. That is the key component. The whole agency is built around making sure that those people, in this case Nate, can get that work done. And really what that's meant to do is to enable all of you to, as Alicia said, fully focus on the problems at hand and actually address the technological problems. So two key components of the program managers. They are relentless and fun and deeply passionate, and they can only be here for 3 years or 6 years if they're really good. And so this is a feature, not a bug. One of our program managers said, I was fired on day one. And so guess what? There's no longevity there. There's no desire to, the only thing you're trying to do is use the days as wisely as you can. And so this is part of why we end up with this incredibly urgent agency, and why everyone, you see Nate and his team, everyone who's here who's been supporting these things, why we are all so motivated to move so quickly, because the clock is ticking. I don't know about you, Nate. I only have 993 or so days left, and he has less than that. So the thing that I note is we're going to need to replace him at some point in time. So if there's anybody in the audience who thinks that this might be fun, please do come talk to me. The second thing that I note about program managers is that they are the ones that are bringing the ideas. And so this is the result of Nate's job talk. He pitched this to me before he was here at ARPA. Clearly, it's changed a lot. But this is how the agency works. As much as I'm responsible for the proactive health office, I'm like vaguely responsible. Like I have an idea of what the strategy is that I want to do, but ultimately the only things that actually get done are the things the program managers bring in. And so I wanted to do something in sleep, but Nate has a very clear idea as how we're going to go do this. So those are the two things I wanted you to take from this. The PMs are term limited, which means you only can and could possibly do this for a little bit of time. And they really do drive everything that we do. We're going to skip a whole bunch of other stuff here that I probably should talk about, but I want to leave you with two things that are relevant for proposal writing. These Heilmeier questions are how we evaluate research ideas, both the ones that we're pitching, like what the REST program is trying to do, and every proposal that we see. This is how we think about moonshots. This is how we think about the really difficult work that is ahead of us and the technological challenges. And so what I want you guys to know is you guys are writing applications to this or to any other ARPA-H related thing. The thing that we have to do on the other side of it is write a document to Alicia that says, this is the Heilmeier questions for this particular effort, whether that's a project, whether that's a program like REST or an effort that we're trying to get done. This is how we justify all the work that we're doing. And the key of this for the program manager is really in the first couple of these. What are you doing that's different? Why hasn't this worked before? Like, what are you doing? What's the miracle or miracles that are required to make this work? Let's be really, really clear and upfront about that. And how quickly can we test that? How quickly can we fail at those miracles if they're not going to be possible? But more often than not, more often than you'd expect, those miracles actually come to fruition. And that's through tenacity. That's through everyone working together on a team, building these things together. And that, right, to me, is the magic of the ARPA model. So when you're writing, realize this is the work that we have to do afterwards. The other thing that I wanted to focus on is how we get a bunch of these things done. What happens once the program launches and what's going on? Because I think this helps inform the way you guys think about and apply to these programs. We are deliberately funding multiple, unlike, we're not trying to make serial bets. We're not trying, I shouldn't say this too loud, right? We're not trying to preserve capital. We're trying to preserve time. And so we deliberately fund multiple teams that have complementary competing ideas. That's how we make these miracles happen. For the REST program, there are a couple of miracles that Alicia outlined. And so you might have a theory as to how we might address one of them, and that may or may not work. But the key about a program and an investment like this that ARPA-H makes is our ability to make multiple investments in each one of those ideas, each one of those miracles that has to happen. And that increases the chance that it's actually going to happen. And so it behooves you to understand the space of what else is going on in the space. How is your thing different and why is it better than the rest of the space that's going on? That's in the other work that we have to do, is understand what else is going on in the space. And so how are you actually differentiated from all these things? Why do you think that your idea is going to be meaningfully different and is going to help us achieve one of the miracles that are required for REST? That's a critical component that we need to take out of your proposal. And you also have to fully acknowledge that there's a decent chance that your idea is not the right one, and that's okay. We still want to invest in a bunch of them to understand which ones actually bear fruit. And so the way that the program works, you'll see this, Nate will talk a bit more about this, is we have these checkpoints where we have funded multiple teams with multiple ideas as to how to make this one miracle come to fruition. And we've given a lot of thought as to what has to be true if we're going to believe that miracle has been accomplished. And so the work that has gone into the milestones and all the work that you're going to do around contracting to figure out what are you actually delivering in terms of building the solutions to the REST program, those are going to give us an indication, hopefully fail early if your idea is not actually going to make it. And the beauty of the ARPA model is we cut those things off. We move the funding to the ideas that continue to work. And by doing that, end up eventually actually tackling all the required miracles. That means that some teams will not make it till the end, but there's always more ARPA-H stuff coming out, I assure you. And so some of our best performers are the ones that say, hey, this isn't working. Can I do something different? Can you help me shift? Can you help me tell me what else? How can we shift this together? It's entirely a collaborative environment here, and it's very active in terms of the program management. So I want to leave you with those couple of ideas to how to think about what's happening on our side as we're evaluating your ideas, because you all do have wonderful and brilliant ideas. Many of them are going to be meaningfully impactful. And a handful of them are probably going to make this program come to fruition, but that doesn't mean that all of you are not on this team. All of you are providing a very vital service to what's going on here and to figuring out how do we actually address the sleep problems that are ahead of us. So the last thing that I want to say is to reiterate that we need program managers. All of us are term limited. All of us are only going to be here for a little bit. And so if you see this and you're interested and you're excited about the REST program, if you're excited about the work that's going on at ARPA-H or at Proactive Health, come talk to us. And it doesn't have to be today, but at some point we're all going to age out and we're going to need more help. And so rather than hear more from me, there are plenty of interesting programs we could talk about here. I would much rather give you guys time to talk with Nate and to allow Nate to talk about his vision. And so with that, Nate.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, Alicia. All right, so on to the main event. What I'm here to talk about and you to learn about, which is the REST program. REST stands for Restorative and Health Enhancing Sleep Time. So this quote at the top, Americans are facing a nationwide sleep crisis, was in a report from about 8-10 months ago from the Make America Healthy Again Commission. And you can see all of these headlines here that people are ignoring sleep. Why can't Americans sleep? It's an infuriating, expensive road to getting a good night's sleep. And increasing recognition that sleep is a public health problem facing our country. There's this one quote, though: "Sleep disorder drove my son to suicide and broke my heart," that I want to dwell on for a moment. I came into sleep research as a suicide prevention researcher. We were asking questions at DARPA about what's the next frontier if we're going to prevent suicide. And we shifted to working on sleep. Over the past couple of months, as I've launched my other program, Evident, I've been sharing stories about 2 women in my life who died way too early, who were very close to me. My cousin, Corinne, who died from organ failure around the age of 40 from addiction. And my really close friend, Molly, who died by suicide, also right around the age of 40. I don't know if either of them were sleeping well, but I do know that people who die by suicide frequently, if not always, are having a hard time sleeping. And I do know that people who are struggling with addiction have double the chance of recovering from their addiction if they're sleeping well. So whether we could have saved either of their lives with the work that we're trying to do in this program, I don't know. But what I do know is we will save lives. We'll save lives from suicide. We'll save lives from addiction. We'll save lives from cardiovascular disease, from stroke, from dementia. If we can do what we're wanting to do in this program, we are going to transform our ability to stay healthy longer, and we are going to save lives. That's what we're here to accomplish. So when you're thinking about, yeah, sleep is great, let's make sleep better, what I want you to really think about at the core of this program are these statistics on the bottom of the slide here. What we're really going after is reducing long-term health risks across a wide variety of conditions. We know that Americans and people all over the world are struggling to get a good night's sleep. Unfortunately, we also know correlationally and causally that leads to a lot of health complications, 2 to 3 times higher risk of a variety of mental health disorders. Sleep disturbance is a hallmark symptom of almost every single mental health disorder. But also 30 to 50% increased risk for cardiovascular disease, diabetes, strokes, dementia, etc., and devastating economic consequences. And so what we asked with the REST program is this question here: what if we can make sleep a controllable biological system that we can measure, personalize, and optimize to improve health? That's what we're here to answer. We're here to find the technologies that enable this, that enable us to improve a wide variety of health outcomes by improving sleep. So today, what's really challenging to this is when we measure sleep, we are not currently measuring the way in which the sleep you get is making you healthy or unhealthy. That's what we need to do first. And once we do that, once we redefine sleep quality as sleep that promotes good health, and we can measure that and define this very specific drivers of good health during sleep, that enables precision and personalized diagnostics and treatments. And so we want to get to high measurement precision by really focusing on those microstructures and features of sleep that drive high prediction of health outcomes. So very accurate prediction of health. When we think about the current state, here's the top of this slide here is a spectrogram, and the red, of course, is higher power. And what we're seeing in this top spectrogram is really a zoom in on the sigma band, and so a bunch of spindles occurring. We often think of spindles as during N2 sleep, but then you look at the next part down on this image and you see that this approximately 1 minute of sleep is bracketed into about 50% N3 or deep slow wave sleep and 50% N2 or light sleep. And yet there's spindles across all of it. Also, if we look down one beneath the sleep staging piece, we can see the power of the slow waves. And we actually see in this 1 minute of sleep the greatest slow wave power classified during light sleep, not during the slow wave sleep. So when we do this kind of classification, was utility to it to simplify really complex sleep data, but we lose information. We lose critical information about those drivers of health outcomes during sleep. So we need to move beyond this. I don't want to see any proposals that just recapitulate the same old 5 sleep stages that we've been measuring for the last 70 plus years. We need to use the power of the tools we have today to really define the features in sleep that drive good health outcomes. And we can see sort of a representation, an extreme representation of how this might look in 2 different sleepers on the bottom here. You have one, they're both women who are around 60 years old, one with a high risk of dementia and one with a low risk of dementia. And you can see in their spectrograms, they're radically different. We can visually see this. We need to measure it and quantify it, though. So there are 3 technical barriers that we are going after in this program. First one is what we've been saying over and over again. The quality of sleep during sleep remains unmeasured. And what I mean by that really is we need to measure the way in which the brain activity and body activity during sleep promotes good health outcomes. Secondly, when we do our gold standard sleep measures today, polysomnography, we can't do that in the home. We can't do that, even if we could do it in the home, we can't do it every night over and over again. Yet people don't sleep in a lab, and people's sleep changes night to night. So we know that if we're going to truly be able to measure good sleep for people, we need it in a form factor that they can wear on any given night in their own bed or wherever they are traveling to, etc. Third, we need to control multiple features of sleep across the night. We've got lots of evidence that I'll talk about that we can control singular features of sleep with neuromodulation and other technologies. Can we put it together into an integrated system that truly optimizes all of sleep and do that, again, where people actually sleep? In their homes, not in a clinic, not in a research lab. So we have 3 integrated components to get there. And I'm going to talk about each of these more, so I won't belabor this slide, but there's foundational data development and modeling. There's the first solicited component, which is to measure and diagnose sleep from the home. And the third one is to control and treat sleep from the home. So let's talk about this modeling and discovery. And we actually have in our agenda a moderated discussion that we're going to be doing today with 2 of the key people for this work, where we explain the work that we're already pursuing at ARPA-H to address this. But I want to talk to you all about it as proposers too, because just because we have some teams working on pieces of this, absolutely want your ideas to contribute to this too. So think about how you can interact with this work. Think about how you can use the resources this work is developing as you develop your proposals. First and foremost, we are building a data set that doesn't exist today. Full stop. We have, and you'll learn more about this in a bit, but we've based upon some power analyses, we have estimated that we need at least 1 million people to get 750,000 to 1 million people in this data set to do what we want to do in terms of being able to accurately model the variability from person to person, the variability across sleep diagnoses, and the variability of subtypes of different sleep disorders, and also knowing that sleep is not 1 or 10 variables that we measure during the night. It's hundreds of variables that we're going to be measuring in this data set with a Ph.D. So we're building a data set of 750,000 to over 1 million by the end of the program, people where we have complete polysomnographies and complete medical records all tied together. We'll then be able to use advanced machine learning and analytic techniques to really uncover what we mean by good night's sleep. So for example, just want to share this. This is an example of how we can move away from the expert-derived 5 stages and ask instead, what does the data tell us sleep actually looks like? And in this analysis, this is not the be-all end-all necessarily. This is just an early analysis on how many records? About 11,000 people. So we're going to get to 1 million people and learn a lot more when we get there. But you can see here that this analysis doing self-supervised learning suggests that maybe actually on any given night of sleep, there are 8 distinct states that the brain cycles through, not 4. But maybe even more interestingly, across the lifespan, there are 25 or more distinct stages that we can measure. And it's just that in any given night, on average, you cycle through about 8 of them. These might be really important to defining health. We're going to find out. And so we're going to do more of these kind of analyses with our larger data set to really figure out what sleep looks like when we apply our modern analytic techniques to a large database. Secondly, these are 2 papers that came out relatively recently, one in just this last year and one the year before that, looking at larger data sets and trying to do very similar to what we're talking about doing, which is using health outcomes as sort of the anchor to then say, can we train a foundation model or can we develop a risk score based upon your sleep data? And the answer is yes, we can do that. We can train a foundation model on large data sets, and that model can then predict your health risk. We need to go a step further, though, because of the immense variability that occurs during sleep, and also because we need to know causality, and we need to know which of those features, which of those biomarkers are steerable and intervenable. So that's where we get into our solicited technical areas. Technical area 1 is all about in-home measurement and diagnosis of good sleep and poor sleep. So what we learn in these clinical sleep studies can be transferred into the home. On the upper right here, you see some examples of a paper where they did exactly what we're talking about doing for sleep, but they did it with cardiology. So they trained a foundation model on a large data set of diagnostic ECGs. And then they tested it, and they found that it performed better than any other model for recapitulating the full diagnostic ECG with fewer sensors. So can we compress the amount of sensors we need into a comfortable wearable form factor for sleep? That's one question. The other thing they did in this cardiovascular paper is they were able to, with very high accuracy, use this foundation model to classify different cardiovascular diseases. So similarly, we want to look at, can we classify mechanistic subtypes of poor sleep quality? And so we expect performers in here applying to this to tackle those two problems simultaneously. And one example, one way someone might go about this is very similar to this cardiovascular paper. Pre-train a large foundation model or some other type of model on a large data set, and then fine-tune it for the tasks at hand with in-home technology. So like I was just describing, we can do for sleep what's been done for cardiology. On the upper left here, we have an image of sort of a theory-based classification of insomnia subtypes that we did with some of the data that we're going to be, the foundational data set that we're building. And it shows clearly that these subtypes of insomnia carry different disease risks. So not only can we classify insomnia by objective markers, but those subclasses have different health risks. They're not the same thing. They shouldn't be treated in the same way. And then can we also go from a full clinical PSG to in-home wearable technology that's comfortable to sleep in any given night? So think about how you would do this. Like, what would be the most transformative way to get there? What do you need to pull that off? That's what we want to see in your proposal for this technical area. So now I'm going to get a little boring and read these slides, because I think this is what you really came here to see. What are the expectations? What are the do's and don'ts for this technical area? Well, first of all, in-home, in-home, in-home. I've said that a million times. I'll keep saying it. We want to enable that translation of clinical quality data to technology that can be deployed in the home. And we want that mechanistic subclassification of insomnia as a test case of our ability to really classify different types of poor sleep quality or disruptions to the quality of sleep you're getting. Health prediction capabilities. Again, everything in this program comes back to the way sleep predicts and drives health. So we expect there to be that health prediction capability developed and proven out with this technology. It also has to be usable. People have to like it. So we want human factors design and engineering brought into this so that we can, and then we're going to evaluate performers based upon whether the users actually like it and will use the technology too. That's going to be one of the key evaluation metrics. Human subjects research, and then integration. So Alicia and Glenn spoke to this. This is a program. We're going to have performer teams. I'm not wanting you or expecting you or to work independently. People who are funded on this program, we're going to be getting you together. We're going to be thinking together. We're going to be iterating together. We're going to be driving towards what is the most transformative solution. And that's what we'll keep moving forward. So to be successful, and when you're thinking about putting your proposal together, think about how you interoperate with the other core areas of the program, foundational data modeling and discovery, as well as the treatment side of the program. And then industry cost share. We expect you to move towards industry cost share. In phase one, you don't need any industry cost share in your budget. By phase two, we expect about 10%. By phase three, 50%. I've had lots of conversations with all of the major wearable tech companies. People are working on these ideas. If we can create an unlock here, those companies will want to be on board with you. So I want you to think about that and plan for that and find your industry partners and think about how you will build cost share into this program as the technology matures. Because if we are going to take this into people's homes, it needs to be commercialized. It can't just be a research finding. So build this into your program, very important. So in scope, measurement during sleep, multiple night measurement, broad 24-hour characterization of sleep and arousal. You know, if it's important to measure all of the sleep 24-hour cycle in your model, do it. If you don't think it's necessary, don't do it. Those are all potential in-scope things. Wearable and neurable devices. So is it something you wear on your body? Is it built into your bed? Is it on your nightstand? Is it in your room, in your house? How do you measure this? It has to be something that goes in the home, either on the person or near the person. Think about, whatever data you think is necessary to accomplish this, build it in. Whatever sensors you think could transform the way we measure sleep, build it in. I'm not putting limitations on this. This doesn't need to be limited by today's PSG data set. This is only limited by the capabilities of our inventiveness and the technology we have today. Absolutely in scope for you to bring your own data sets to the table and share them with our foundational data team and build them into our data set. Absolutely in scope for you to think about generating new data that builds into the overall program. Also similar, clearly in scope for you to do your own foundation models and data-driven discovery of sleep with our data set if that informs your approach. And, any additional sleep disorders, insomnia is emphasized in this program, but we're not exclusively an insomnia program. We're focused on the quality of sleep writ large. So any sleep disorder is potentially in scope, so long as you address the insomnia metrics built into the program. Out of scope, though, general wellness tracking, sleep hygiene interventions, or evaluating the effect of lifestyle broadly in large data sets. There's a lot of work going on in that. There's a lot of work going on from the industry side on doing exactly that. We don't need to be redundant to what Google is working on in terms of wellness tracking and pushing sleep hygiene interventions out to people. As I mentioned early on, traditional staging and time in traditional staging, not of an interest here. And actigraphy only sleep time metrics. If you're only measuring sleep time based upon wearable data, that's not addressing the quality of sleep you get while you're asleep. So also we will be looking critically at whether you have a credible path to objective screening, diagnostic, mechanistic characterization, and health relevant prediction. If you don't have those things, that will be frowned upon. Okay, moving on to technical area 2, control and treat. So now that, we've got new models, we've got new measurement in the home, how do we actually optimize your sleep? Well, there's been amazing work done in the past few years, and I had the pleasure of funding and working on as an advisor a couple of programs at DARPA developing this technology for neuromodulation of sleep. We can do this, but the technology today has largely focused on driving a single feature. Most of the neuromodulation research and technology is really focused on two things, right? Like helping people fall asleep faster, so suppressing the arousal drive or increasing the sleep drive before sleep, or modulating slow waves during sleep. We know we can do those two things. There's also evidence that we can stimulate spindles and improve memory, for example. And we know that by enhancing some of these features, we can improve your heart rate function, heart rate variability, and heart health. We can improve reaction time, cortisol, metabolic function, weight loss, immune system function, cognitive function. I mean, the list goes on and on. There's been lots of research showing that we can modulate slow waves or spindles and drive good health outcomes. But most of these, if not all of these published studies still focus on one thing at a time. They're really good iterative mechanistic science. We need to move past the one thing at a time and into a comprehensive solution that optimizes sleep throughout the entire night of sleep. As mentioned, this slide is just a bunch of images that say we can do this. We can do this with electrical stimulation. We not only can enhance slow waves and spindles, we can actually target and enhance the coupling of slow waves and spindles. We can, boost slow wave power. We can suppress slow waves. We can do all sorts of stuff to the features of sleep, especially slow waves. And we can do it with electrical, we can do it with acoustic, we can do it with ultrasound, we can do it with haptics, we can do it with temperature. do it with light. I mean, there's a bunch of different technologies out there. So I want you all to tell us what are the most innovative technologies that are going to get us there. So we want neuromodulation that is responsive to sleep physiology. And when I say the term neuromodulation, that doesn't just mean directing energy into the brain. I mean it in the broadest sense. So haptic stimulus, so vibration, haptics. There's other types of sleep stimulation technology that targets circadian systems, whether that's light or temperature control. Just think broadly about how you are stimulating sleep physiology and enhancing sleep. We do want some sort of feedback, real-time, continuous feedback, but it's also an open question to me. Like, what's going to drive the biggest improvements to sleep quality? Is it a closed loop system? Is it an open loop system? You tell us what you think and make a strong argument in your proposal. Does have to be non-invasive because we want to do this again where people live in their homes for people who are not severely ill. I think that there's really awesome potential of deep brain stimulation implants and BCIs for improving sleep, but I'm not gonna put an implant in my head because I don't need one. But I do want to be able to get a really good night's sleep every night. So need to target those microstructures of sleep, and in particular, the features of sleep that we're finding are driving the health outcomes. Mechanistically informed. And then here, this bullet here, we almost need to bold it. At least 3 candidate interventions to improve sleep quality in insomnia. This is a key feature of the program that we've built in to the request for proposals. If you are proposing to technical area 2, you need to bring a minimum of 3 ideas to the table in phase 1 that you will test independently of each other against their ability to improve sleep, and also be able to make the argument that they're synergistic and that you could combine them. Now, what do I mean by 3 things or 3 interventions? Very broad, very open. If you have one technology, can it target 3 different microstructures or 3 different regions of the brain or 3 different parts of the sleep system and body? Do you have multiple technologies that you're gonna bring different types of technologies together that do different things? Just want things, 3 something or others, because what we want to do is build that, we really want to find the most powerful approaches to optimizing sleep, right? Remember when I said there are hundreds of variables during sleep? So if I fund 3 teams and each team only has 1 idea, how much did we miss? So at a minimum, everybody has to think of 3 different ways to modulate sleep. In the first phase, you'll be building towards integration, but we do want to see some testing of how they work independently too. Needs to be personalized, adaptive, needs to integrate with the rest of the ecosystem. There needs to be safety and tolerability, IRB approvals, and human subject research. There needs to be a commercialization and readiness plan. And you need to be getting ready towards building that integrated system that could be tested in the home in phase 2. So we're going to move fast. So again, strongest proposals are going to deliver some sort of intervention during sleep, but we're not opposed to interventions that occur outside of sleep if they enhance the sleep you're getting. Direct energy, I mentioned this, variety of different approaches. This is just a sampled list. There's so many different technologies and approaches I could rattle off here. I'm not going to, you all know what technologies and approaches that you're working with that you think show promise. So bring your biggest idea, your boldest ideas. Bring ideas that you think really are going to nail it, and ideas that you're like, wow, this is crazy, this is new, I don't know if this is going to work yet. But remember, you get to bring at a minimum 3 different ideas to the table in phase 1. So it's okay if some of them don't work out, because some of them might work out, and we'll see which ones are best. Mechanistically informed targeting can include a wide variety of things. Again, you make the argument to us what the most important mechanism is to target, how you're going to target it, and how that is going to improve the quality of sleep people get and the health they have downstream. And you can target a lot of different aspects of sleep. But out of scope, again, purely, so efforts focused solely is underscored for a reason. I'm not opposed to you including any of these lifestyle or pharmacologic or non-personalized treatment ideas into your protocol, so long as it's not the only thing you're doing. Right? So those lifestyle interventions might be very synergistic, and maybe you want to test them as part of an integrated solution. But a purely lifestyle-based intervention is not what we're looking for in this program. Similar to pharmacology, if there is a novel drug, but a drug that you want to test that you think really could improve sleep quality as opposed to harm it, like a lot of current pharmacological treatments, we're willing to listen to that, but a purely pharmacological approach is out of scope. If a treatment isn't personalized, does not credibly sort of use objective signals from a given individual to improve that individual's sleep on any given night, that's out of scope. So that's where we are really looking for these personalized treatments. And I mentioned this about the phase 1. So multimodal approaches are not only allowed, like that's where we're moving, right? That's what we're driving towards in this program. But in the first phase, you should be building into your proposal a demonstration of how each individual approach affects sleep quality. So you can apply to either or both technical areas, right? You can just do a TA1 proposal or a TA2 proposal or an integrated proposal, but you only get to submit one proposal, right? So a prime or a PI in particular can only be PI of one proposal that they deem is the best proposal that they want to be affiliated with. You can consult on, you can help out with other ones, but you really can only submit one proposal as a lead. A dual TA proposal is acceptable, but it's a single proposal. It's not two separate proposals. And there's instructions in the ISO for how to do that. When you submit your proposal, it's a 6-page solution summary at this stage. If you submit to both TAs combined, it's an 8-page solution summary. So you get a little extra page allowance to do that. And then here is our program structure. I'd encourage you, this is in the ISO, correct? Yeah, I'd encourage you to really look at this carefully in the call for proposals, as well as the program metrics. These program metrics and this program plan is what we are going to be managing towards and how we're going to be finding the best solutions and moving towards from phase to phase. So here are the metrics. These are really important. The ones that are sort of highlighted are considered the core metrics, but we're using all of these metrics to evaluate. So you can see in technical area 1, in that first phase, we expect you to be able to demonstrate a high degree of ability to have objective diagnosis of insomnia using in-home systems. And then we also are going to be setting the subtypes. We're not going to tell you which subtypes you need to classify in phase 1. We're going to determine that as a program as a whole, define those, and then evaluate them in future phases. But what really critically then is being able to show that you have this fidelity to the full clinical data in your metrics. We'll be using that to evaluate progress for technical area 1. And then technical area 2 is really all about your ability to treat sleep quality. So in phase 1, right, the really only metric we're going after is how these interventions improve the quality of sleep you get as defined by the way sleep drives your health. What that exact metric is, we're building it. We're building it as we go. And so we're going to be talking more about that today with our data team, but also we will be working on that as a program as a whole. And then we will be establishing benchmarks in that first phase. But what we're really looking for in phase one is just what are those interventions that are improving these new metrics of sleep quality. And then you can see those metrics get progressively harder so that we eventually get to that place where we have treatments that are highly, highly effective for anyone who's struggling to get a good night's sleep. So lastly, a few little expectations. Work collaboratively. Think about how you build collaboration into your proposal. We expect you to build into your proposal participation in program meetings and reviews, right? So we'll be doing an annual program meeting. That should be in your travel budget. Execute against our measurable milestones and deliverables. So we have our metrics. Build into your proposal any other proposed milestones and deliverables that are quantitative that we can evaluate your progress on. Maintain good regulatory practices for human subjects or animal subjects, et cetera, as needed for your proposal, and contribute. Contribute to our data sets, contribute to the overall mission of the program. We have additionally an integrator on our team that we'll talk a little bit more about in a bit. The integrator is going to work with all of the teams to translate the outputs from the foundational modeling work that anybody's doing into program metrics. And also to establish some common data elements and benchmarking and evaluation frameworks. But additionally, they are bringing to the table the ability to integrate technologies in a novel way. So beyond just, so let's say some of the best technologies we find are technologies from different teams. We have an integrator that can test out whether they could be pulled together in a unique way. And then we have an independent evaluation team that will work with us to evaluate progress against the program metrics. Timeline. Solution summaries are due in about a month on August 12th. We will then, from there, people will be invited or not invited to do a full proposal. So the solution summary is a hard gate. You either get a yes or a no. If you get a yes, then you get to do a full proposal, which is not a full written proposal, but is an oral pitch. And we have instructions for that. There will be some written components to it, but you can expect that there will be a pitch week in November where people come and pitch their full proposal ideas to us in person. And then we will select from there and have program kickoff sometime in the late winter to springtime, depending on how fast we can move. And that's all. Looking forward to the rest of the day, to your lightning talks, to any sidebar conversations we have, and then we have a couple of panel discussions as well. Thank you so much. Contracting time. Caitlin Burdens is the agreements officer and is going to explain all of the contracting pieces.
Thank you, Nate. So he gets to talk about the fun stuff. I get to talk about the whatever else it is that we do here stuff. So this is the part of how you get to do what Nate was talking to you guys about. So is there anybody in here who has not submitted to an ARPA-H ISO yet? Oh, yeah. Oh, wow. That's exciting. Okay. So I'm going to start ISO. That is a term that we made up at ARPA-H. We actually had a competition for like, what should it be? We like our acronyms. You should ask Nate how long it took him to come up with REST. I actually don't know the answer to that. That's part of his pitch to Glenn, like, do you have a cool acronym? So we came up with ISO, and it was very, very deliberate because we are not NIH, we are not DARPA, we are not anybody else. We do contracting differently here. So the point of that was maybe if it's a term you don't know, you'll read it and you'll figure out where it's different. And then you'll ask questions about why and how it's different and where we go from there. So that's kind of, we're going to go through the ISO itself. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at it, skim it. I hope that you've read it, but I'll take a skim. As Nate just said, solution summaries are mandatory. I think I'm going to say that about 7 times in here. You guys can play some kind of game if you want to count. It's a lot. And that's for a reason, because they are mandatory. And then as Nate said, from there, we will let you know if you're selected to the full proposal stage. One question we get a lot at the solution summary phase, so we'll answer it like up front, is there's not a funding range, there's not a limit. And that's because we want your ideas and we want to know how much you think that cost. If we gave you some arbitrary number of X million dollars, you would fit your solution into that budget. We don't want crazy, like we're still the government, we have budgets, but we want to know what you think it'll cost to get this done, and then we will work with you to fit that into what we're able to do. So we don't have ranges, there's not a dollar value that I can give you. This is highlighted because this is my favorite part. Please read the ISO. There's a lot of great information there. Everything that Nate talked about should be in there. If it's not, ask us a question. Like, we don't pretend that it's perfect. We've already made 4 amendments. Hopefully you've seen those, but it's because it's not perfect. So if there's something that doesn't make sense or you want clarity or need clarity on, ask us. We are pretty responsive. We'll get back to you. This will be shown a couple of times and we're monitoring it. We're pretty quick with it. We have people monitoring it live. So if you have questions today, ask them and we'll try to get back to you soon. Solution summaries are mandatory. If you haven't heard, I think I'm only on time 2. And there is a reason for that. It helps us and it helps you. It helps us go quickly. We only have to read 6 or 8 pages, and we don't want to waste your time. We want you to be able to get what you want to do down to a reasonable number of pages so that somebody like me can read it and understand it. And then from there, we'll see if it's worth investing your time and effort and money for the next phase. We have some things highlighted here. So again, we will let those know if you're selected to the next phase. Like we try to make it a very clear process, and we have a reason for everything we're doing. So if something doesn't make sense, again, please ask us. They're due the 12th at noon Eastern. Please don't wait till the last minute. It's still a website. If all of you try to submit at the last minute, it will hopefully not crash. But there's always something that comes up, right? And if you're having an issue, reach out to us, preferably before the 12th. You can't submit something and won't let you upload a document. Let us know and we're here to help, but it's really difficult for us to help you on the 12th at like 11 a.m. As Nate said, 6 pages for a single TA, 8 pages if you're doing both. We outline here everything that you need to have in there. Please adhere to those page limits. We do not read beyond 6 or 8 pages. So if you submit that like 7th half page, we're not going to read it. We will cut you off at the 6 pages. So please keep it to that 6. As Nate said, man, Nate, you stole my thunder. The prime on one submission. You can be a sub, you can be a consultant, an advisor, whatever you'd like to name yourself on others, but a prime PI on one submission. And then teaming arrangements. We expect that you will have to team. We do not have preferences. We don't care if academics team with industry, small business, large business. We do not have preference on there. We want the best solutions, and tell us how you're going to do that and why you are qualified to do that. Okay, eligibility. So following on that PI thing, something we get a lot, FFRDCs. VA specifically is a government entity. So what we recommend is if you have somebody that you're interested in working with from the VA, typically they have other affiliations. We would encourage you to explore those other affiliations that they have. We do talk about here a policy for exceptions and waivers. I spent months sending one request for one of those up once, and then it was denied. So if you want to submit it, I will humor you and I will entertain it, but I would not stake your submission on that being approved. It is a process. We are the government, we have processes. That's not one that is generally going to be allowed. So please consider that. Non-US entities are eligible. So we do prioritize domestic entities, but if you are a non-US entity, you are still very welcome to submit. We will still evaluate your proposal according to our guidelines. If you want to team, that's great. If you want to team with a domestic entity, that's great. We highly encourage that. This is another big one. So sam.gov, a lot of you, if you have not submitted to ARPA-H or the government, sam.gov is a requirement. That's not like an ARPA-H rule, that is a government rule, and it can take a long time. We stay on here, I think 14 days. We have seen it take 90, and we have seen issues when the government closed down for a little bit last year. They lost a lot of their sam.gov workforce, their help desk, a lot of that. So if you are not in there, I would highly encourage you to at least start that process now. It's not required until full award. So you have solution summaries, you have full proposal, we have negotiation, but we want to move quickly, and that will absolutely be a barrier if you're selected and we cannot get you awarded. I assume none of you guys in here are like debarred or suspended, so we'll just skip over that part. Once again, solution summaries are mandatory. And Nate kind of talked about the process. So it is outlined in the ISO exactly what we will be evaluating them on. We do not compare your submission to anybody else. We do not put them in like a rank order and take the top 6. It's really about your individual submission. Does it fit what Nate is trying to do? And so I really encourage you to read these and think about them as you are preparing your solution summary submission and making sure that you're addressing kind of what we're looking for there. From there, you will be invited or not invited. We will let you know. If you are not invited, we will not be providing additional feedback. So there is a mechanism if you have some kind of burning questions you'd like to know that, we can kind of talk through that if you're not invited. But again, that's really just helping us with speed. So if we write these kind of great, very pretty letters to everybody about like why your proposal was not selected, it hinders our speed. So if you do have questions, we're always happy to answer them. Our reason for being here really is, like we talked about, there's other opportunities. We don't, just because you're not selected for REST, you might be great on another program. We might know about that program and can direct you somewhere. So please reach out with any questions. And then, so the notifications will come out after the solution summary phase. I was about to put a timeline on myself. I'm not going to do that. As soon as we can, we will try to get you things back very, very quickly so we can keep moving. The question and answer. So again, I kind of talked about this. Please check it before you submit it. Make sure it's not already out there. We do try to answer them as quickly as we can. There are certain questions we will not answer. So which TA should you submit towards? I don't know. You guys tell me. Like, what do you think is best? If you want to combine them, that's awesome. We have that option. Or pick what you think is best and justify it to us. If your idea fits within REST in general, again, you tell us. If you're not sure, maybe read the ISO one more time, figure out what you are kind of qualified to do, interested in doing, what difference you think that you can make for Nate's program. But that's also the point of like the solution summary. Like if you're not sure, submit it. It's 6 pages. Like it's not that much. So let us decide if we think that it's something worth pursuing. Again, we don't have preference on teaming arrangements. We always like talk about how it's like arranging marriages or like setting your best friends up when you don't know, because we don't want the responsibility when it doesn't work out. So it's on you guys. If you think somebody would be a great partner, awesome. Work that out on your end. That's not something that we have a preference or will ever advise on. And then again, general thoughts on a topic. Like every topic that comes in is cool in some manner. Even we get like crazy things drawn on napkins. Like, well, they're cool, but let us know if you think it's applicable to REST. Submit a solution summary, 6 or 8 pages, and we'll let you know if we think that it's worth pursuing. Again, these slides will be publicly available, so you don't need to write down the websites or anything, but take a look, go through the questions, see what other people are asking, maybe what's on people's minds, things like that. Okay, here is SAM.gov. Hopefully you've all seen it. If you're not familiar with SAM.gov, you can follow it. So you can set it up so that you get notifications, because again, we're on Amendment 4, sorry. And this shows you to make sure that you're looking at the most recent version. So if you follow it, you will get a notification anytime an amendment is posted. The most recent version should be all that you can see on the main page, but if you start clicking around, you can get into archives. So make sure that you are on, we're currently on Amendment 4, so if you're looking today, it's Amendment 4, but this shows you where to figure out kind of the log of records and what we've done and the changes we've made. And we'll always call out the changes so that you can see, we'll put them in red text and kind of call it out in the description so you're not searching for what we changed. Okay, so this is the fun part of ARPA-H. We almost exclusively, well, fun for me, I don't know about for you guys. We almost exclusively do other transactions. So those, they're not grants. I probably should say that 7 times because we get asked a lot about grants. They are not grants. So they are very actively managed. Nate will be in your business. Not every day, but like every week, definitely every month. So they are not grants. We don't just give you the money and say, come back in a year with a report. They are actively managed, but the agreements themselves, there's still a contract by definition. You guys sign it, I sign it, and it outlines what we're going to do. But what they allow us to do is mirror kind of industry more. That's what they were built on. Like, let's get rid of a lot of kind of the government language, the 87 clauses, 87 pages of clauses probably, and let's really just outline what we need to have in there. And they're also negotiable. So if you are selected out of the full proposal stage, we'll enter negotiations. And your team and my team, we will sit down and say, do we need this? Does this apply? Does it help you help us? And we'll kind of go through the agreements together and cut out what we don't need. Like I always have a goal of like how many pages I want. And I think max is usually like 20. And like, I don't want a 50-page document that we have to all read. So that's the really cool thing. They're flexible. Again, as we were talking, if something's not working, we can modify it like within a day or two. You know, we can make changes. We think we're adaptable. We try to be adaptable. And we want this to really mirror the work that you're doing. And so that's the goal of it. To really just let you guys do the science, leave the business to like us behind the scenes. And that's what's really cool about these instrument types is it allows us to do it. So it's probably more for your business side people, but clearly I get really excited about it. And maybe applicable here is like things like data rights, patents, that kind of stuff, fully negotiable. So we outline what we want, what we think we're going to do, what we think you might want, but we want you to tell us. Like that's the whole, if we had the answer, we wouldn't be here. So you guys tell us what you need and how we can help you make Nate's program a success. Okay, this is intentional. The solution summary is like wider than the other ones because nobody in here needs to be worrying about the full proposal or negotiation and award phases yet. Everybody's in like solution summary. So again, that is 6 or 8 pages, 1 or 2 technical areas. Here's everything you need kind of outlined up here. And then the website where you'll submit it. Again, this is all, we'll send out slides later. This is just to outline the process for you, a visual. As Nate said, it is a hard gate. So a lot of programs at ARPA-H, if you submit a solution summary, you can still submit a proposal if it's not encouraged. This is not that because solution summaries are mandatory. And those selected out of there will be given the instructions for full proposals afterwards. So don't worry about any of that yet. We'll get there in a couple of months. Okay, final guidance here. So once again, the ISO is binding. So if Nate said something crazy up here and it's not in the ISO, don't listen to Nate, don't listen to Glenn, don't listen to anybody else. If it's not in writing on that document, it is not relevant. If there's something that you think should be in the document, again, let us know. Submit it to the Q&A, we'll take a look. Like we're happy to amend it. We've done it many times. Ask your questions. Like don't sit there wondering about something unless it's one of those questions we're not going to answer. You can wonder about those. But if there's something that isn't making sense, that's not lining up, let us know. Please, like we are here to help you make this program a success. My reminder to register in SAM because it can take a long time and we have had to hold awards while people get registered and try to work through the help desk. So everybody has a nightmare story of sam.gov. If you're not registered, please do that. And again, please read the ISO. I know there's a lot in there. It can be repetitive, and that is very much on purpose. We go through line by line. Do we want this here again? Yes, we think that's important. So if you see it multiple times, it's probably important. But again, if it doesn't make sense, let us know. We're very happy to work with you guys to answer questions. We don't have the answer. That's your job here. So, I get a break. Do I get to dismiss everybody for break? Please come back at 10:45 for lightning talks and sidebars. Thank you, everybody.
All right, we're going to get started. If everybody could take your seats. It's great to see so much enthusiasm and discussion going on today. To break things up, we didn't want to just do more PowerPoints because between my talking this morning and then the lightning talks, that's a lot of people standing at a podium and talking all day long. So for this afternoon session, we're going to do a couple of moderated discussions with some key thinkers and advisors or pieces of the puzzle. So if we're going to start off here with 2 key people from our foundational data modeling and discovery effort within the program. We have Dr. Brandon Westover here from Stanford University, where he's the Director of Neurological Artificial Intelligence Center and the Chief of the Stanford Epilepsy Division. Dr. Westover earned a Ph.D. in physics from Washington University in St. Louis and his M.D. from Washington University School of Medicine. His research group develops machine learning and AI approaches to improve medical care for patients with neurological problems, including epilepsy, brain injury, seizures, cerebral ischemia, delirium, and sleep disorders. Brandon is leading the development of our sleep health data commons at ARPA-H and is one of the key people working on the AI modeling of sleep quality on the program. Also joining me on stage here today is Dr. Will Kuhn. He is a neural systems engineer and neuroscientist at Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Laboratory, where he leads work at the intersection of artificial intelligence, big data, human electrophysiology, wearable neurotechnology, and closed-loop sleep modulation. He is leading up our research integrator effort on the REST program. So to get us started, because each of you play a key role in the REST ecosystem that we're developing, I'd like to ask each of you to first introduce the work that you are doing for the REST program and any information that you think is pertinent to the proposers about the work that you're doing. Brandon, if you want to go first.
Yep. So maybe I just give it to answer that a little history. So I had not heard of ARPA-H, I guess, as of maybe 9 months ago or so. But my group, together with some people in the audience, Emmanuel and Gary, we had an NIH grant where we were gathering, actually we've assembled a set of 100,000 patients worth of polysomnography data, a little more than that. And our idea was that we could learn, if we could get their in-lab PSGs together with all the electronic health records data. And I'll explain what all means, because people usually think, oh, that means ICD codes. And it really means all. It means notes, the clinical notes written by the doctors and nurses and everyone who takes care of the patient, their reports written about tests they got, whether cardiology or imaging of the brain and so on. It means all of that. We've been working in this NIH project, thinking if we could do that, we could predict cross-sectionally, maybe find out how much information there is in the physiology about what conditions people have. And maybe it would work to even predict when they don't have it now, who's at risk and identify what things are uncoverable from that. So we've been working on that, and it turns out that resonates with the sort of this idea that Nate was developing. And so we've been working to sort of understand how we can scale that up. So my role in the program will be to take all the data that we have now in the first 6 months, make it, it's actually all there. So if anyone wants to use it, it's there now. But we're going to make it substantially more organized, easier to search. We will sort of expand on some work we've done with we call phenotyping, which means identifying which conditions patients have much more accurately than you can do with ICD codes. I can talk more about that later. And then which symptoms they have. If they've reported it in the doctor's notes, then in principle, we should be able to extract that. And so we'll be working on, again, doing all of this, making it possible to do it for 1 million patients. Ambitious but feasible given the groundwork that we've done. And then building as many different useful models as we can, to do what I just said, predict cross-sectionally, longitudinally, either, various health outcomes, symptoms, trying to develop useful biomarkers that can be candidates for things that you might want to measure in the home, or intervene on. And so I'll stop there.
Quick follow-up question for proposers who are interested in, considering how this data might be useful to them. What would be available at the start of the program?
When is the start of the program? Like tomorrow?
No, like spring.
In spring. Yeah, 100,000 patients worth of data, like everything I just said. So the notes, meds, ICD codes. We have imaging for some of the patients. For a couple of the hospitals that are involved, have brain imaging available. So that may be very relevant in some ways.
Will there be any wearable data?
There will be. So there'll be some wearable data. That's the short answer is that we have whatever's being collected as part of routine clinical care. And so that usually does not include wearable data. We will be trying, during these first 6 months and then throughout the program, we're going to be building ways to take in wearable data to make that very easy to take it in and then transform it into this, standardized format that makes it linkable, and searchable. So if anyone, I've been approached by a few people who say we have interesting wearable data. Can we contribute it? Yes, absolutely. We want to work with anyone who has data sets that you think could teach more, give a different angle on the questions that we're all studying.
Great, thank you. And Will, how about you? What's your role on the program?
Thank you. I'm Will Kuhn. I'm a scientist at the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory. We're about 10,000 strong right now, 7,500 PhDs or so, and about 125 to 150 of us work in AI, robotics, and neuroscience. I will be leading a large team there doing research integration. And I understand that this is something that we've been getting a lot of questions about, I myself and Nate and his team as well. Please feel free to reach out. Remember, I am not an official ARPA-H representative, so all direct questions answers have to come from Nate, but I'm familiar with the program at this point and happy to engage. So please do reach out if I can help. I see the research integrator as the connective tissue of the program. As Nate was mentioning this morning, this is something that's going to have to move fast. Performers are going to bring in their specialties and hit the ground running and want to focus on getting their technology and their contribution right. At the same time, we have a program that's trying to look across teams and trying to take away wins and lessons learned from successes and make sure that nothing gets orphaned as down selections happen. So one of the things that we'll be doing very early on is establishing frameworks for interfaces, for APIs, standards across the teams that will help us be able to interoperate as the program matures. And towards the end of the program in phase 3, we'll be playing a significant role in actually putting that together, actually doing what an integrator does and integrating technology across teams. Earlier than that, we'll be doing some work with Brandon and his team on the foundational model side as well. And that will involve reaching out early and understanding what performers are bringing to the table and how we can harmonize across teams, including performers and Brandon and Kent Werner's team as well.
Yeah, thank you. And Will just previewed one other thing. There's a person missing on this stage for the foundation data modeling work, and that is Commander Kent Werner from the Uniformed Services University, who is also working with Brandon's team to help build that database, and with Brandon and Will to do some additional modeling. And so we're, in addition to the data that Brandon is pulling together from hospital systems around the country, the Department of War and the VA are active participants in the REST program too, and will be contributing data to the data commons. Okay, so a central question for REST is how we should define and measure sleep quality. So, how do you see us doing that in a way that is scientifically rigorous, clinically meaningful, and actionable for intervention? When we say sleep quality today, what do we mean? And how is it measured today that's different from how we're trying to measure it in the REST program?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think I love this quote. Sleep quality is one of those things that everybody understands exactly what it means until you are asked to define it specifically. And there are half a dozen explanations that any of us could rattle off right now. It's the number of awakenings in a night. It's sleep efficiency. It's sleep onset latency. It's some normal-ish distribution of sleep stages that reflect good sleep. But in reality, none of that is really telling us about what we think the core functions of sleep are, which is to perform the restorative functions of our physiology and biology that move us towards a healthful state. So changing the endpost to be tied to outcomes that are related to health that can be objectively measured over time and longitudinally, and most importantly, multifactorially. Your devices these days like to spit out some number that just gives you one number. This is how good your sleep was last night, trust us. Likely, it's going to be more complicated than that. So I think performers are going to have to think about this being a likely vector of different states and panels that are in aggregate are going to tell us about healthful state trajectories.
Yeah, so maybe I'll build on that a little bit. So the way we currently measure sleep quality is just a hodgepodge of things, but they're mostly based on the hypnogram, length of time, sleep fragmentation index, like the stage distribution, how close it is to normal, and so on. But there's that's not that. The way we want to be measuring it. Well, let me say two things about it. So I think it's helpful to separate the how to measure it from like what we're really trying to do. So what we're really trying to do, I think, in the end is, and we've kind of talked about this quite a few times already now, we want to predict, see the differences between people who are healthy and not healthy in a myriad, ways. And then we want to see what measurements tell us the risk for developing problems that you don't already have. And then we want to know the difference between things that can be changed and cannot be changed, right? So that we can actually develop effective interventions and have something that, proximal that we can actually track that tells us how well we are, changing that risk in the future. So we want things that are causal. So that's kind of what we're trying to do in my mind, tie sleep to define, tie sleep to health. Now that does trace back to, how do you do it? And, so things like, for example, sleep staging. So maybe sleep staging is part of doing that, that mission, but would need to be redefined in some way. And so maybe that could be, there's obvious things that everybody thinks of when they complain about what's wrong with sleep staging, and maybe it doesn't have enough stages, right? And there was some evidence of that earlier. Maybe it's the wrong temporal resolution, or it should be multiple temporal resolutions, right? And then maybe that helps if you characterize it in these different ways. There's a lot of things in sleep. We heard some of them earlier that we know have some biological function and relevance, like the slow waves, right? There's some relationship to lymphatic clearance, and that may be related to your risk of developing neurodegenerative disease in the future. There's this spindle density, right, that has a role in some psychiatric disease and in learning and retention of things that you've learned. So there's probably spindle density is going to be part of, or other characteristics of spindles or slow waves. So there's all these different how things. Maybe it's going to be helpful in the end to get to the goal to do whole brain mathematical modeling, right? Maybe not. But I think one really important thing in the program to kind of keep in mind is part of our job is to come up with clear metrics that we can use to judge any, how to see if it actually got us closer to the goal or not, because it won't be enough to just say, well, this is like way more interesting, mathematically or from a machine learning standpoint or whatever. Like all those things may be good, but they kind of have to prove themselves against some metrics. So we'll be working on coming up with metrics, coming up with clear sets of patients where you can sort of test hypotheses. So for any foundation models that anyone develops or that we develop, clear, well-characterized sets of patients to test against.
Great. And, on that point, first of all, why has this been so difficult to do historically?
Well, yes. Why has it been hard to do? There's a lot of answers to that. I mean, I'll just some really obvious things. So in let me first just say why it's important again. So everyone knows about ChatGPT and Claude and these language models and vision models, right? But they're awesome now, and they're just all kinds of applications. They came to be in existence because we have data sets of we have billions of examples to train those models on. That's why we can build complicated models. In sleep, the basic problem has been we never had a data set that's sort of rich enough or large enough, varied enough. It doesn't representative of everything that we care about. And why is that? Because it's hard to share data between hospitals is one of the fundamental problems. So part of the work that we've done, I think, as a foundational work is we've developed a whole bunch of data sharing agreements with many hospitals. So actually, if your institution is not part of this data sharing consortium, contact me. It's very easy to join at this point. That's one reason. Another reason is that once you do have the ability to share the kinds of data we're talking about building here, it's not so easy to harmonize it. But thankfully we spend the last 4 or 5 years figuring out how to do that. So that's becoming easier. mean, I guess maybe another is, I mean, this is really an opportune time now, right? Now once you have data, it has become the barrier to building sophisticated models has just gone down and down and down. So we are in a kind of a golden age of machine learning and AI once we have data.
Yeah, exactly. I think I'd also say it's not any one thing on its own. It's the convergence right now of a number of technologies that are mature to a state that combined can become more than the sum of their parts. We have miniaturization has reached new heights, as you saw this morning in half the lightning talks as well. It's gotten easier and cheaper to scale and distribute these types of devices at high quality in the home. The models have gotten cheaper, the barrier of entry has gotten lower, and that synergy is really, really powerful. It also spans a lot of disciplines. And I think one of the advantages of this program scope is looking across all of those disciplines, embracing a really collaborative culture and trying to bring together all of these different independent parts that, as mature technologies on their own, aren't going to be the enabling thing that makes this happen. But together, it's a totally different story.
So a question that I've gotten a handful of times today from both people interested in Technical Area 1 and Technical Area 2 is, how are these program metrics going to be developed, and how should they be thinking about what they need to measure in their proposals in order to enable them to be evaluated against the new models and metrics that we're going to be developing. So if you could talk about the type of data that they should be thinking about, or what these models might look like.
And so I can't give you a final answer, because that's part of what we'll be doing, is trying to iterate on what the right things are to measure, and that's not trivial. But I can give you a flavor for some of the things. So one thing we'll be working on, and there's some of this is already published in the literature, like a first attempt at this, but there's a way to characterize, insomnia of different kinds. So part of that, part of what we'll be doing is, again, developing ways to extract from the notes, who's reporting having a hard time falling asleep or staying asleep, who's feeling sleepy, various symptoms that are relevant, and then we will be building models, at least as good as the ones we've already published in the literature, but we think better now that we have more data that correlates strongly with that, right? And then we will be looking into the model to see, okay, what is it that lets you tell which kind of insomnia phenotype you are, in these definitions, and trying to understand carefully as best we can, are these things that have plausibly could be changed by any of the interventions that anyone can think about. So we'll be publishing the model. We'll be putting that into the database so you can search on it. Similar, we'll have a bunch of other measures as well. So there's a thing called brain age index, which just essentially tells you, how much older or younger than your chronologic age do you appear to be. Better ways of doing sleep scoring, sleep depth measures. So we hope to put a whole bunch out there, and then by lots of conversations and testing, figure out which ones are most worth putting as metrics to be judged against.
And I think I can probably also offer some maybe useful heuristics in how we're going to interact with some of those numbers, how we're going to quantify things. There are half a dozen or so litmus test items or questions that you might want to keep in mind when you're looking at candidate mechanisms that can be measured, and then a number attached to. Is the signal or the candidate that you identify, is it reliable? Is it repeatable outside of different cohorts and different slices of the data? One of the things that we'll be doing in the integrator team is really turning the data sets upside down, the models upside down, to tease apart hidden biases in the data. We don't want an algorithm, for example, to learn that the 60 hertz hum on some tertiary hospital that deals with the sickest patients has identified this way to predict really poor health in the future, when it turns out to be the equipment.
I should kind of just add on. So and the biggest confound that we've found, including in our own work going back, age, right? So it's easy to predict how old you are, and that correlates with your risk of cancer and a whole bunch of other things. Right? So anyway, making sure you're predicting something beyond what you can know by, asking someone their age.
Right. So yeah, repeatability and generalizability there. Modifiability. Obviously, it's great if we have a new clinical feature that's informative. That's great for clinical practice and for advancing the field. But for the goals of the REST program, needs to be something that can be nudged, pushed, or changed. So it needs to be modifiable. Now I have a couple other things here somewhere.
Causal.
Yeah, talk
Yeah.
about that, Brandon.
Yeah, so modifiable is not necessarily same thing as causal, right? So you may be able to, maybe you can change, the amount of slow waves that you measure in some way or another, but that's different from knowing that it, it's likely to make someone's risk of developing dementia lower, or heart disease. So yeah, those are different things. Actually, I don't know if we have time. One thing you can do with the data that we're assembling, right? This is something we call emulated trials. How many people know what that is? Emulated target trials. Yeah. So so this data is longitudinal. Our intent is to cover the whole medical record that the patients have. And so what you should be able to do in principle is if it's the case that let's say you take, I don't know, I'm just making this up. Let's say metformin, you have some hypothesis that it alters sleep, and then downstream from that, they have a different risk of developing, say, cardiovascular disease. Well, as long as people in the data set similar people have been treated in different ways, like they got metformin or they didn't, doesn't need to be randomized in the way that it would in a trial, but as long as similar people treated different ways, then in many cases you can actually figure out what would have happened if you did do a randomized trial and estimate the treatment effect. So we're looking, that's a way of getting at causal, hypotheses from retrospective, observational data that we hope to really take advantage of.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and once you get into causal control, there's a broader perspective to keep in mind as well. We want this to be a beneficial intervention causally, and that requires awareness of other lateral systems. We want things that aren't going to make something else worse at the expense of something getting better, and that's also something that the cross-team awareness that our teams can help keep an eye on, can help provide performers.
All right, I've got one last question for you two before we open it up to the audience. This field of AI and ML in sleep specifically is rapidly evolving. In particular, both of you have published papers in the last year, will in the last week, on AI models of sleep. So, given that this is happening rapidly and you are both at the forefront of AI modeling of sleep, what's still missing? What's still blocking us, and what do you hope REST can accomplish and push forward?
I'll jump in. I think one of the gaps that I see is mapping back an effect to an observable real world phenomenon. You can look at that as model explainability, or how does some latent space representation that proves to be really powerfully predictive and may even be modifiable in the abstract, how do you map that back to understanding that this is a particular type of slow wave with this type of characteristic, or this type of spindle in the certain physiological context of condition A versus position B? I think we're seeing a lot more of these tools coming online, and both models that tease apart otherwise black box models and can kind of reveal what's under the hood, and also new types of models that are themselves explainable from the start. And I think that's going to be a critical part of how we move forward.
Yeah, I would echo some of those things. I would use the word interpretable instead of explainable, because the distinction is you kind of make them easy to troubleshoot and understand and transparent from the beginning. That's one direction, one thing that's not really been done well. But I think for me, the most important two things haven't been done are So specificity, right? So we need more of the subgroups of interest, right? Like the, if you heard the webinar, I think you have to divide sleep up into kind of maybe a lot of bins to really kind of address everything. And understanding any one bin can inform the other one. So, across the lifespan is important. Diseases that affect sleep, understanding, to what degree anything you can measure in sleep is specific or not specific for that, or, as opposed to just an umbrella of things. And then the other thing that I think actually, although you might not notice it, like it's actually, so we have a lot of wisdom from decades and decades of doing clinical sleep scoring that we don't want to throw out the window. And so some of the models that sound pretty good, if you try them out, they actually don't reproduce basic sleep scoring in all the details. So I still think that trying to find ways to not throw away some of the hard-won, constraints that we have from clinical experience is important.
That's actually, I think, also bearing out in some of the foundation model work that we're looking at. And when you compare head-to-head models that are designed specifically to replicate that type of approach versus an unsupervised or self-supervised approach, and you look at them head-to-head, a majority of the lifting in terms of predictive power is coming from learning traditional sleep architecture. And we're extracting additional value beyond that, but that's a really important point that you made there, Brandon.
Great, thank you so much. We are open for some audience Q&A now, so if you'd like to ask any questions.
Tess.
Thank you so much. This is a great opportunity to get the insight. I like the focus on kind of the downstream effects. And I'm wondering, though, how much in the proposal you want to see things. We have collaborators that do track, Parkinson's and AD, but some of those things will take years after, right? So how much of that should we be thinking about that as readouts to these sleep interventions as part of the proposal? Or do you want more focus on just really improve the sleep architectures, do all the things that we know, and some of these downstream things and other kind of funded programs will be there? Does that make sense?
That does. Some of you might get tired of hearing me say this, but what do you think? What's your biggest idea? That said, the program's 5.5 years maximum. And so we're not going to be able to read out longitudinally 10, 15, 20-year risk monitoring within a 5-year effort, right? And so I think the question then becomes, what do you think the most transformative way to get at that is, and which measures do you think are actually important to prove out your idea? And then secondly, I'll say that the models that we're talking about building here with the larger database, our hope is that they enable us to make some sort of inference in the short term about those long-term risks. By using these new metrics that Brandon and Will be developing, we'll be able to see in the short term, in response to an intervention, whether a person's sleep has moved them into a lower risk category.
Right. I mean, so to the extent that we're successful at developing plausible biomarkers, say, of risk for Parkinson's disease, and you can sort of understand them, then yeah, maybe to me, and I'm not judging the applications, but it would sound attractive to then use that as a marker so that if you change it in the short term, even though you don't have 10 years to measure the outcome, that would feel like, to me, like a progress.
Hi, Joita Dada from UMass. Thanks for the great discussion. I understand the details that you're sharing about the data resource, and it sounds spectacular. One question I have is on the model sharing aspects, because since you already have this wonderful foundation model that you've trained the Sleep FM paper that came out in Nature Medicine, do you expect parallel efforts for people to build their own foundation models on using some of this data, some of their own data, or do you expect a synergistic effort across institutions?
Yeah, so I'm going to pass this to you quickly, but I'm going to say my broken record thing, which is, what do you think you need to do that would be the most transformative? So if you want to work with their models as they develop them, and you think that's going to work for your program, do that. If you think you need to develop your own foundation model or your own way of analyzing the data, do that. If you have your own data that you want to bring to the table in the program, do that. So whatever you think is the most transformative.
I agree.
Yeah. So I have a quick question. I think in the next stage, there is two potential models that you could see. One of them is trying to come up with what you really need to measure at home and then do it in a large number of people. And the other model is trying to say, there's a lot of people out there that are measuring tons of things already. And we can, whatever we measure, we integrate it all and we try to figure it out. I mean, the idea, I'm sure you have thought about this, Brendan. You know, so the question was a little bit, what is the tension between these two? Because the future, in some ways, is probably the convergence of many, many devices that are going to go into a single platform and see the type of prediction you can do with whatever modality you have. So versus, you know, so I was wondering what's your opinion about this crux?
Maybe, I mean, this gives a chance to say something that I actually hasn't come up earlier in the day that's really important. So my personal view is that if we already have actually a lot of really good things that we can measure now. Like the brain age index is one that I'm a fan of. We developed that. But if you measure, the way we've been able to do it so far is just, you know, in the lab. I mean, we actually did do a very small pilot study where we did it longitudinally. But for most of these things that we're going to be developing, we have the advantage of, you know, 100,000 now and eventually 1 million people, but most of them will have had 1 or 2, you know, sleep studies. You can do so much. You can get, you know, bring the noise down in those measurements a lot if you can measure it longitudinally at home. So in my view, like the most valuable thing that's going to come out of all the efforts to measure sleep in the home are like that you can measure sleep in the home rather than, you know, maybe you'll come up with new algorithms, but I bet that it's just the ability to average whatever, you know, metrics we'll come up with over multiple nights that will be more valuable than anything for translating this into, you know, real world value. That's my guess.
I also think there might be a third way in the modeling dimension as well. One thing that we've seen with self-supervised foundation models applied to very high SNR signals, rich, dense signals like a full polysomnograph, trained on lots of data, is that if you then apply transfer learning principles in a rigorous manner to the field, to deploy data that have a less fidelic view of sleep, they actually bring to bear the higher resolution internalization of latent structure that they've learned from the richer signal set and can bring a lot of that power with them to the field. And in that way, you're benefiting from both, not necessarily at the expense of each other.
Just one more thing I'll add, though, just that what I meant by so you referred to polysomnography as a high SNR, you know, signal. The signal that I mean is so like take the brain age thing. This is something you measure, you know, like you predict the age and then you look at the difference. The variance on that is like 7 years or something. So, you know, in a population level, it correlates with risk for various diseases. And so, but if you can measure it, each night you measure it, you know, the number of nights it goes, the signal to noise ratio goes down by like 1/√n. Yeah. So if you can measure it, it's like 7 days in the home, whatever association it has with any of the health outcomes, like dramatically improves, right? It becomes something that you could potentially act on.
One more question. Okay. Two more questions.
Hi, my name is Morgan Mancata from Neuro Health. I'm a COMISA patient, and so I understand how objective measures can be used to measure sleep disorders and impact them as well, like a polysomnography test, HST. But I also understand how psychological factors can influence my sleep and my insomnia, whether I have an exciting conversation or I'm stressed before a meeting the next day. One thing I haven't heard many people talk about is the impact of psychological factors and behaviors on both the diagnostics of sleep and going into these different data streams, but also at the intervention layer. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I mean, I think yeah, probably a good idea if you're going to be doing at-home longitudinal measurements of sleep to measure things like, relevant to the, excitement, stress, and so on, because those are going to account for some of the night-to-night variability and help, probably be important to analyzing whether your interventions are working, or if they don't work, why they didn't work. So I think those are important.
Yeah, and I'll add, and this is a common theme for me as a program manager across everything I'm doing at ARPA-H, which is recognizing the importance of the psychological factors. I am a psychologist and a psychometrician, but what are the objective indicators of those as well? So if you have arousal psychologically, there's probably an objective physiological signal of it as well. And so one of the things we're trying to do is enrich our understanding of the psychological experience with better objective measurement.
So my question actually follows from that. We're trying to measure an clinical entity that is purely diagnosed based on self-report right now. We all know that's a huge problem. It's been a problem for a long time. But it seems like there's going to have to be some sort of iterative process throughout this. That it could be that our recruitment, our eligibility criterion have to change over the course of this study as we understand what some of these objective metrics are. So I was wondering if you could speak to kind of what that iterative process could look like.
Yes. That's the plan. Yeah, so it was on the slides and I didn't talk about it much this morning, but we expect these elements of the program to really interoperate. And what we mean by that is, the work that we're doing with the big data sets and the AI modeling will absolutely hopefully generate some new metrics and some new ways of evaluating, some new treatment targets, but we don't want to move linearly, right? So we don't want to do the modeling work and then the measurement work and then the intervention work, because now we're 20 years from now. We're going to do it all at the same time. And the way we do that effectively all at the same time is having a starting point for each and then constantly communicating and evolving your ideas. So really expect performers on the rest, and you can expect that I will be pushing you to think about how your approaches evolve as we learn as we go. All right, thank you both. That is all. All right, our next panel is going to talk about commercialization and translation. And I have two really wonderful guests here, people I've been talking to for quite a while as we've been developing this program to gather ideas and think beyond just the science and tech development to impact and how we get to impact. So first, we have Dr. Joe, how do you pronounce your last name?
Go for it, give it a shot.
No.
I love it. All right. Hardest question right off the bat. Derjevsky.
Derjevsky.
Yeah. So mnemonic, jet ski. I'm going to go ride a jet ski. And you're like 99% of the way there.
All right. Dr. Derjevsky is Senior Vice President. Jet ski.
It's harder when you're on stage with a microphone. I'll tell you that.
He's Senior Vice President of Research and Scientific Affairs at the National Sleep Foundation, the nation's largest independent nonprofit dedicated to public sleep health. He's a clinical psychologist specializing in behavioral sleep medicine, and he leads NSF's research agenda and evidence-based sleep health guidelines. In addition to Dr. Jetski,
baby steps.
We have Steve Weinstein. And Steve is a CEO, entrepreneur, and venture capitalist with more than 25 years experience building and investing in biotechnology, medical device, and digital health companies. He is CEO of Gradalis, a late-stage immuno-oncology company developing a treatment for ovarian cancer. Previously, he served as CEO of Greger Diagnostics, interim CEO of Rox Medical, and COO of the Microbiome Health Research Institute. He was also managing director of the Novartis Venture Fund, where he led medtech practice and helped oversee an $800 million global portfolio. And Steve has been a commercialization and translation mentor for the development of this program. So thank you both for joining me on the stage to talk about how we move from science to impact and how we translate and commercialize the results of this program. So we want performers to be thinking about translation from day one. REST asks teams to consider commercialization from the outset, including regulatory strategy, industry partnerships, manufacturability, adoption pathways, and cost share. So what does it mean to design for translation from the very beginning of a research program? And where do early stage teams most often get stuck when they try to move towards real world use?
So translation is a funny word. Translation is often used when you think about translating from a university out into commercialization or into a commercial activity. There's a whole step in the middle between translation and commercialization, and that's product development, and that's where we are now. And so, where I would encourage you to think about is where you want to end up. What is the target product profile? What do you want the solution to look like? You may not know how to get there, but you have probably a reasonable sense of where you are now. And then the question is, what are the multiple alternatives for me to think about, and what would a product look like when it's finished? And then once you know that, then you can start thinking about various plans, various products, features, and the like to get to that end goal. But you have to have that end goal in mind. The metaphor I always use is you wouldn't get in a car, turn the navigator on, and when it asks you for a destination, you say, I'll get back to you. You have to have a destination, right? And how you get there could be different, but you have to have a destination.
Yeah, that's great. And I'll just pile on a little bit. When I think about translation, I always want to think about it holistically. So it's not just what you're going to translate or why you're going to translate. A lot of that's specified in the call. Also, there's the big who. The call mentions insomnia multiple times, but it actually feels bigger than that. And what I mean by that is we have a public health issue around sleep. So the who, when you're thinking about translation, should be large. It should be people with disrupted sleep, with poor quality sleep. And I came with a couple statistics, and I want to put them out there. So every year, National Sleep Foundation does a random representative sample polling of the public. So this is address-based sampling, so it is truly representative of the public at large. And we give a couple measures, and the measures that National Sleep Foundation administers are really unique because they're graded on a A, B, C, D, and F scale. So you can have people who are performing poorly sleep-wise, but they also have people who are doing good. And I think that good piece is a really interesting segment. Just because you don't meet the clinical cutoff on the insomnia severity index, for example, does not mean you have good sleep health by any means. When we look at people who get an A or a B for their sleep satisfaction on a validated sleep satisfaction tool, 16% of adults. So just to say that again, 16%. Everyone else should be part of the target here, I think. It's the public at large that could benefit from this translation.
Yeah, and so, one of the challenges in what we're trying to do, though, is developing a new standard, right? So we're going to need to also build consensus around this, consensus in the industry, but also for the public at large. So how does a field reach consensus around new biomarkers, new outcome measures, or new standards of evidence? And what's it going to take for researchers, clinicians, patient organizations, and industry to collectively embrace a new standard if we develop one?
Yeah, so maybe I can jump in first here. National Sleep Foundation is a consensus setter. We're the group that told the public how much sleep they need 10 years ago. We just updated this duration. And interestingly, we also have a consensus on sleep quality. It was published in 2017. So it's almost a decade old. Certainly a good time to reevaluate these sorts of things. But in 2017, led by Maurice O'Hyan, we convened a group of 17 expert stakeholders, scientists and others, and reviewed all the scientists or all the published work around what sleep quality might look like, what it means. The only things that were able to come to consensus at that time were indicators of continuity: sleep onset, wake after sleep onset, this and this, such on and so forth. But we use a modified RAND UCLA Delphi method where there's voting and a whole process. Importantly, this method for consensus is to determine whether or not consensus is achievable. It's not to force it. So it determines, can experts agree on whether or not consensus exists? What'll be really interesting is at the end of REST to see if that evidence level has shifted for all these physiological markers of sleep. Will experts agree that there are new markers, physiological biomarkers of sleep quality? And what I think will be really necessary is, are they going to be specific to outcome? So do we need to have a consensus group and a panel about sleep quality and cardiovascular outcomes? Do we need another one for brain health? Or will the evidence be such that it will span, across all these important health outcomes? I think really important questions to be held when it comes to adoption by the public. That's a different consensus question altogether, a different discussion. But for science, this is typically how it's been done.
Okay, so I'm going to be a little provocative and say that having spent 20 years in venture capital, we would look for opportunities to disrupt healthcare, to change the clinical practice of medicine, to fundamentally do something different. And usually we wouldn't make an investment if it wasn't disruptive and if it wasn't going to be the new standard of care. Okay. Disruption sometimes doesn't come from the entrenched leader, right? That means sometimes disruption may not come from sleep researchers, right? I mean, the wearable guys have figured out how to influence even sleep by influencing the consumer and pulling rather than pushing. Right? The researchers can push science up and hopefully there'll be some consensus and maybe something will come from it. But the commercial folks, if patients or consumers like it, it will just happen. And then the research may catch up or it may be advanced. So this is really about thinking differently, and maybe consensus has to come from people with a different point of view. And so I'd encourage you to make sure that when you put your teams together, and I don't know if Nate will agree with this, but get a diverse group of folks. Don't get everybody who thinks alike, who's from the same industry, who's thinking about things the same way, who's been studying the same thing for 20 years. Get people from an orthogonal point of view. Those are usually the folks who end up getting venture capital funding. Those are usually the ones who come up with really creative ideas because they're looking at the world differently. And so sleep is one of those interesting areas where some of that has already formed because of big tech and wearables. And so it's an opportunity to leverage that.
So Steve, you mentioned disruption, and Joe, you talked about consensus building in the scientific community. How do we get the 84% of people, the everyone, to adopt? Like, how does that process happen? How do we go from a commercial side? How do we go from product development to widespread adoption?
If it works, people will adopt it. If it doesn't work, it won't be adopted. If there were solutions out there, you wouldn't have 84% of the people unhappy, right? It's the 16% who don't need help that are probably fine, right? And so the question is, what are the solutions out there that aren't meeting the needs? And maybe that's that target product profile that you need to think about.
I was going to say the same thing. It has to be based on the impact. Right, the impact will drive adoption, the impact, accessibility, all these other things. We at NSF, we poll the public and we've asked them, do you currently track your sleep? Do you use a wearable? Right now, there's probably about 1 in 5 of us track our sleep with a wearable. So that's large scale adoption. That's a lot, 20%. But we also ask, have you ever? And there's another 16 or 15% who have and stopped. And there has to be a reason why those folks are no longer doing it. Then we asked even more telling question, I think. Do you on your daily basis wear a smartwatch that's capable of tracking sleep? But we already know that they're not, because we asked them, are you tracking your sleep? There's another 20% of people who there's no barrier to access. They own the device. They wear it every day. They take it off at night. So to me, this doesn't point to necessarily a problem. It points to a great potential, right? There's a lot of opportunity here, but it also suggests that maybe the impact, the lived experience is not being, fully delivered upon, or more people would be using them night after night.
I mean, if I did a quick poll, I'd suspect that many of you have won the wearable, and then after a while you learned what you learned, and then you stopped because you learned something, but then it wasn't actionable. So if it's not actionable, it's just information. So the whole trick is to figure out how to take that information and make it actionable. And if you can create that impact, then you have a commercial product. If you don't make it actionable, it's a research paper.
So, yes, exactly. So thinking about, this question about designing for real world adoption. So it's same topic we're talking about, but how should proposers really consider the role of designing for adoption while they're still doing early stage R&D?
We've talked on the call, we have a lot of similar answers here. Things need to be scalable. They need to be accessible. They need to be impactful. They need to be usable. They need to be feasible. We know in public sleep health that there's an issue right now with sleep health equity. And if any of these solutions increase disparities, it's not a success, right? So these need to be solutions that people can use day in, day out, and they can help everyone. They need to target us when we're awake, right? We sleep to be awake. We sleep to function better during the day. So they need to deliver on those outcomes that this is all about, connecting these sleep markers to our health, our well-being, our safety, our performance, our quality of life. That's how you're going to get there, I think.
Yeah, and I would say that sleep is such a big topic. Don't try and boil the ocean. Try and figure out how to focus and develop a solution for one element within sleep. And then over time, you can iterate and it will get better. I've heard early conversations about longitudinal data and Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. You may not be able to do everything in 5.5 years, but you certainly can do something. So figure out what you can accomplish in this window of time that you can build on. Try and focus. If you focus on one thing, you may succeed. If you try and focus on 3 at the same time, you'll inevitably fail.
Or in this case, I think the ISO says maybe you have to do 3 at the same time. So maybe 3 and not 4, 5, or 6. Yeah.
Maybe 5.
Yeah. Just pointing that out. Touche.
Yes. But that's a really good question. And is there a way that you think about sort of narrowing versus broadening the problem that people go after in order to better enable translation or use?
It's a great question. I think about cutting across maybe things that are usually held separate. So you could think about environmental factors paired with some sort of stimulation, right? And think about how combining things that are usually disparate and this is for the wearables, you said the typical sleep hygiene or the environmental, and this is for the other folks. If you combine those factors, I think you can also, potentially have a larger impact. So don't disregard the fact that sleep happens within a social context, within an environment. Include those factors. They can't be the only thing, right, that you target. But if you combine that with these other novel interventions that we're talking about, I think you'll have a larger impact. So maybe choosing a couple things from several domains and targeting them together.
So as a commercial person, I would start at the other end. I'd love to get a survey of 1,000 people and figure out if there's one thing I could fix in sleep, what would it be? And just see if there's some overlap, right? Are there a couple common areas, which is if you could just help me a little bit with this, it would make a difference. And that's just a way to start. And then you can find a solution for that, and then you can expand over time.
So how do you think about engaging the end user in the development of a commercial product, Steve, starting with you?
Yeah, I mean, the good thing about sleep is everybody understands it. You don't need to explain it to everybody. And ultimately, they are the consumer. If you build a product that's uncomfortable, that they don't like, that's complicated, that doesn't solve their problem, you don't have a product. So, they are literally the most important person to start with. They define the problem set that you're trying to solve for, right? The science is the tools to solve the problem, but the problem is defined by the consumer and the patient.
Yeah, and Joe, so similar question to you, but say riff off of anything that Steve said, obviously. But I'm curious from your perspective, how can people think about engaging the consumer in research?
I mean, I think it's a necessary step. If you're going to be designing something for a real person to use, you need to speak with real people. It just only makes sense. But now when the potential target population is 86% of adults, that's an awfully wide net. So be particular, recruit people, talk to them, do some of these focus groups. I don't want to sound too much like a homer on stage, but there's a wonderful group called National Sleep Foundation who's been around for 35 years and actually has been the public's trusted source for sleep information. But find partners. I mean, think about the ISO. It's all about team building. So make the team intentional with the desired impact at the end known, and work deliberately to understand what people want, what kind of form factor, what kind of intervention, what is something that would actually be usable and realistic for people. It has to be realistic. It has to be accessible. If someone won't use it, if they don't understand it, they won't use it. Right now, when we poll the public, the majority don't have confidence in sleep technology to improve sleep. So over 50% of people come back and say, no, I do not think technology can help my sleep. That's a barrier right there. So there's some education, there's some listening that needs to happen.
Great, thank you. I think we'll go ahead and open it up for public Q&A now. Does anybody have any questions?
So when we were just listening to the previous panel about the databases and digging into the data, suppose it turns out that the metrics that we need to improve don't improve the qualitative surveys that people take, or it isn't what they want as a commercial product. How do you think about this in terms of I'm thinking about I might go to the doctor and they say, hey, you have high blood pressure, you need to take this pill. It's not something I want. It's not in fact, it might come with side effects. How do we square those two things? That we might have to improve an aspect of sleep that isn't something that the consumer wants or even realizes. Sometimes I wake up from my wearable, it says, you slept great, and I don't feel great. So how do you think about that?
So I'll start us off here. That's a really intriguing question. Certainly, and I think both of you mentioned the critical role that the end user, the consumer, us, the public, as potential users, need to feel like the information we're getting, the treatment we're getting is helpful and usable. Otherwise, nobody's going to use it, right? And today we generally just ask a person, do you feel rested? Right? Like that's sort of what a lot of this boils down to. We're probably, there's going to be some degree of never getting away from people wanting a product that helps them feel better when they wake up in the morning, right? But based upon some of the preliminary, the modeling that's been coming out from Brandon's team or Emmanuel's team at Stanford, these new foundation models, sleep is also a window into a lot of health outcomes that are very meaningful to people. So even if you wake up feeling rested, maybe there's a world in which you learn something about your health, and hopefully we can translate that into something that you want to act on anyway. I mean, if you don't feel rested and you don't want to act on your health risk, then maybe we don't have a product and we have to pivot into something else. But
I just comment one thing, the foundational work is kind of identifying sleep ground truth. And then, the target product profile is the product that you want to develop. There's ambiguity on both sides, and you have to be comfortable with that. Don't pick something so out there that you can't solve the solution between them, at least not initially, right? There's enough out there. I mean, when I was a freshman in college, I was told, go to the Met, find a painting you like, and describe it in words. It's really hard, right? But if you like it. And the same thing with sleep. If it's a good sleep or bad sleep. So we're struggling to explain it, not understand what it means at the end. So I think there's a way to thread the needle between ground truth and product, and I think that's the challenge that's in front of you.
Yeah, but you speak to a really interesting concept, right? We know for a long time that objective measures of sleep and subjective self-report of sleep rarely align. So much so that the clinical guidelines for insomnia say that, objective measurement is not indicated, specifically not indicated. You don't have to do a PSG routinely on someone who shows up with insomnia. Part of rest might actually help identify some of these biomarkers of poor sleep. So that's one thing. But if you're having a true impact on someone's daily life, I think you'd be hard pressed to find someone that says, I don't really want that, right? If you're actually helping them stay awake or avoid drowsiness behind the wheel or have better interaction with their kids or their, significant other, that's something we all want. And if it can be achieved through optimizing sleep, again, I think you would have widespread people lining up at the door, assuming it's accessible and, there's no cost barriers and all the rest of that.
Thank you very much. I'm Chuck Seisler from the Harvard Medical School, and I want to get back to a comment that Dr. Joe Czyzewski from the National Sleep Foundation made, and that is in referencing that iconic NSF Sleep in America poll, with the data that so many people are really experiencing problematic sleep. And the ISO kind of dances around that issue, and I'm hoping that Joe is going to convince you to issue revision 5 of the ISO, because the ISO sort of starts out with sleep problems, and then it goes to insomnia, and then it says that we want to move beyond insomnia, and Dr. Westover pointed out that we're sort of locked in to the definitions of insomnia that we're stuck with, I think was what he said the other day at the Sleep Research Society sponsored meeting. And yet then, so all that's encouraging because we can go broad, as Joe suggested. But then in TA2, it says we're going to be judged by the ISI, an improvement of at least 7 points on the ISI scale, which means that we have to take people with extreme sort of, you have to bring people in who can make an improvement on that scale by at least 7. And by the way, only the first 3 questions have anything to do with insomnia. All the others, you can get a high score by having sleep apnea, or other sleep disorders. So the question is, would you consider revising the ISO so that we can actually achieve what Joe's talking about?
I don't think we need to. And let me explain why we don't need to. So there's a couple things going on. First of all, there are more metrics than just the ISI built into the ISO. And I'd really encourage you to look at the other metrics that are not just ISI related, because critically, there's 2 other metrics for technical area 2 that are really, really essential here. One of them is the clinically meaningful response on these new sleep health metrics that we're going to be developing in the program, right? So the relationship between your sleep and your health outcomes across multiple health systems and domains. So does your intervention help an overwhelming majority of people improve their health based upon these new metrics is a key metric in the program already. And then secondly is we have a goal by the end of phase 3 to have these interventions produce a 50% reduction in multi-domain health risks. That's the bold goal of TA2. More than anything else, can we use sleep to drive a 50% reduction in multiple health risks and multiple chronic disease risks? So why is the ISI there then at all, you might ask? Well, we wanted two things. One gets a little bit to something Steve said, which is don't boil the ocean, right? So insomnia is a focusing function for the program. It's not the full goal of the program, but it's a subpopulation that's very common for which treatments today largely fail. And it's a population where we can see larger increases because they have worse sleep. So it gives us an opportunity to test whether what we're doing and what's being developed in the REST program can really move the needle in a population that has sort of more severely worse sleep problems, right? But at the same time, it's not the only metric. So yes, we do want to test the REST technologies in the insomnia population, also precisely because it is a sleep disorder for which we have the least objective diagnostics and the least successful treatments, and it's super, super common. Any other comments?
But
I'm just going to let you handle that one.
But you're presuming that they're on a linear, that insomnia is at the extreme end of the sleep problems, but it may not. It may be a multidimensional space. As Steve would say, you need to focus on 1 or 3 or whatever it is, focuses to get there. And if you focus on, in order to achieve that one objective, if you focus on insomnia, you may miss the other 60% of the population.
Maybe, but I think more likely is we will develop solutions that we can then start to take out to market and start to solve those other problems that are out there. Insomnia is not a homogeneous disorder. It's a heterogeneous symptom, much like a lot of mental illness. And so if we can get to high treatment response and remission rates in insomnia, we're not solving one problem. We're solving many problems simultaneously, and it will take a precision and a personalized medicine approach to do that.
Sounds to me like
I do agree with that.
Core to this question is whether or not clinical therapeutics developed and tested in insomnia translate to the population with poor sleep health. And I think we've seen some evidence in the past that this is the case, some evidence that it's not the case, right? We know sleep hygiene's not an effective intervention for insomnia, but general good sleep practices are what we recommend for the public. So there's a case where the things don't align, but I think it's an empirical question. Do things developed in maybe an extreme use case that may or may not be the same? It could be distinctly different because of the multiple dimensions of sleep health. Does it translate? Does it not? But a good place to start is in a very prevalent disorder that's maybe at an end of severity, whatever spectrum that is, but they're at the end of a severity spectrum.
Jan Gubanek, Spider Therapeutics. I believe to really scale the ultimate technologies coming out of the program will need reimbursement. And payers typically are quite particular about specific metrics that they care about. And so I wonder, and that's actually for Will and Brendan also, have you initiated some discussions with payers also? What metrics would they actually reimburse or pay attention to?
Yeah, so I'll start just really, really quickly and say that without going to the insurance companies, those payers, we have as part of HHS, we have engaged with CMS, which is the largest payer, which drives a lot of the reimbursement system. And they're excited about this program and they're going to be engaged with us straight up. Secondly, the largest healthcare system in the United States is already part of the program, and that's the Department of Veteran Affairs. So we have the largest payer and the largest healthcare system in the country engaged with the REST program. And I think that once we get those two systems on board, it changes so much. Do you have other comments?
Yeah, no, and I think because you're focused on impacting healthcare, whether it be mental health or other downstream comorbidities of sleep, there'll be a payback. And I think that's important.
And I was just going to note quickly that this is not unrelated to the previous question, because payers pay for treatments for a disorder. Yes. And people with a disorder go to visit their healthcare providers at these big healthcare networks. You don't go in and say, I have poor sleep health, and then get a treatment from a healthcare provider, typically. So they're all related and complicated questions.
It's one of the reasons why this is a great problem for ARPA-H, and that wouldn't necessarily be solved elsewhere.
Yeah, quick question for you. And I think one of the biggest impacts I see is going from the lab to wearables people are doing at home is that now you have the user getting involved in their own health more directly. And I think two issues coming up here I haven't really heard discussed is the gamification and the placebo effect for people like monitoring their own stuff. Because usually there's some delay and all that kind of stuff. I'm just wondering, and I'm also worried a little bit, especially with the gamification, of that having a wearing off effect where there's an initial, kind of interest in it, and then it kind of, like we mentioned before, I tried it and it was interesting, and then I kind of wore off. I was just wondering if give any input on that.
Do good science. So when we go to the technical area 2, the treatment portion of the program, and you look at the program plan. Steve and I worked on this a lot. Like what's that program plan built around? It's built around the pathway from early R&D discovery, engineering, and design work to a pivotal trial, right? And so you will see each phase of that technical area 2 building on the prior one, and the conclusion of the program would be sufficient evidence to incentivize venture capital and other investment in a pivotal trial. A pivotal trial, of course, for devices requiring control and demonstration of efficacy. So that's, as we go, we want to test some sort of control group in phase 3, but really the goal here is to get to the point where industry will invest in that larger scale pivotal trial.
Yeah, I wanted to say that I agree completely with you regarding the importance of having the government and the VA, because in fact, what we see now, even in healthcare, is indeed there is a private market of insurance and so forth. Then there is the intermediary ones like Kaiser, where they're really a self-contained single payer system, and then the government. And I think it's very important that we have those represented, because Kaiser or the government, they can actually test really without having to go through the insurance, and the insurance will follow. So I agree with you, and I just wanted to say that. Yeah.
Thank you. Joe, do you have any last comments on engaging with the reimbursement in the clinical system?
No, the last thing I was going to say was actually about placebo. And I was going to say, I love a good placebo effect. If we could come up and give everyone Skittles and that would make them sleep better, I think we'd be better for it. We had to judge it by the impact at the end. If it wears off over time, there's a problem. But I think harnessing the placebo is fine, and it's there for everything, medications, everything we do. So I have no problem with a good placebo effect.
Thank you. Steve, do you have any last comment?
I'll just go back to an earlier discussion around teaming. You have 5.5 years to make something happen. Reach out, find the best people in any one particular domain. Every group has their specialty. find the best of the breed and work together. Don't try to do on-the-job training. You don't have the time. This is too complex a problem, and you're going to end up with a better solution just bringing the smartest people in to work together.
Great. Thank you both so much. All right. Just again, want to thank everyone for being here today and for your excitement and your enthusiasm for meeting each other and starting the conversation about how we can build this program. And I really look forward to seeing the proposals come in. The last thing on the agenda is, as the day went on, you've been submitting questions to our team, and we've developed answers to some of those questions in the moment. So I'm going to read through a handful of ones. If you submitted a question and I don't answer it here, just go to the website. We will be posting these responses on the website. I'm just going to cover a handful of key ones that I wanted to share direct responses with you right now. So the first question is, is a clinical diagnosis of insomnia a requirement for a proposal? And the answer is no. We are using insomnia measures to evaluate pieces of the puzzle in different ways across the different technical areas, but you don't have to recruit a clinically diagnosed insomnia cohort to do this project if that's not what you think is the most useful to accomplishing the goals. If you think it's critical and that's what you want to do, you can also do that. So again, continuing on the insomnia thread, because insomnia must be central, how much scope is acceptable for studying comorbid conditions such as sleep apnea or cardiovascular disease? And again, the answer is that TA1, this was, for example, could a TA1 system primarily diagnose mechanistic insomnia subtypes while also using sleep physiology to predict cardiovascular disease or cognitive risk? Yes, that's TA1 should develop in-home systems that translate sleep-related data into individualized health risk assessment, as well as insomnia subtyping and prediction capabilities. So the next question is a really interesting one and fun one too. How does REST program consider the value and role of chemical biomarkers? We've talked a lot about EEG and PSG data. So the question then is, are those chemical biomarkers valid for accomplishing TA1 goals? Would these data sets be considered complementary or primary or of no relevance at all? So as stated in section 2.1.1 of the ISO, TA1 methods may incorporate additional in-home and wearable data sources beyond EEG and physiology. You may do that, such as wearable continuous biochemical sensing. So we can't comment on whether your proposal is specifically exactly what we are looking for or not, but you are welcome to use biochemical measures in this program. Is the use of contactless sensing modalities encouraged as part of TA1? Again, if it accomplishes the goals of the program as stated in the ISO, it's in scope. Another question was, can we use lab-grown technology or hardware besides commercially available? And absolutely, you can design and build and iterate on new technologies or existing commercial technologies, whatever is going to accomplish the program goals and that you can make the argument is going to provide the biggest impact for the goals of the program. If an applicant submits proposals covering both technical areas, but we think that only one of them is what we want to pursue, could only one of the TA proposals be selected? And the answer is yes. If you submit a joint proposal and we only like your TA1 or your TA2, we can do that partial selection. and we would negotiate that with you. Does the limitation on submissions as a prime apply to lead primary investigators or organizations? It's to the primary investigator, right? So we recognize in particular this is pertinent for universities, right? Where there might be multiple PIs from the same institution. That's fine. It's a limitation on PIs. You can only be PI on one proposal. What type of other transaction is expected? OT for research, OT for prototype. Is salary restricted to the ceiling typically required for grants? I'm going to answer in particular, I mean, OTs are very flexible the way we use them. So the OT is the OT. Caitlin, if you have anything more to say about OTs, you can jump up and say it. I'm going to address the last piece here, which is the salary restrictions. Salary restrictions for grants are not applicable to our OTs.
Some salary cap, we can pop more in the gray area without.
Yeah. Here's a question I got a bunch in my sidebars, and as well were submitted. Are the solution summaries, these initial solution summaries, supposed to be focused on phase 1 only, or all the way through the end of phase 3? The answer is all the way through the end of phase 3. But recognizing also that as we've described this program, we expect it to be highly interactive and evolving as we go. And the technology and the modeling capabilities are going to evolve. 4 years from now, when we're starting phase 3, things are going to be different. We will have discovered things, et cetera. So I would expect solution summaries to have sort of like a proportional level of detail based upon the ambiguity of what can be known today. So you need to propose all the way through the end of phase 3 where you think you're going, but I don't expect you to have nearly as much detail fleshed out for that phase 3 concept as you will have for phase 1. The ISO states that in-home systems must capture and compute sleep microstructures at clinical PSG fidelity. Would a primarily biochemical or circadian system be valid, or must it be deployed in-home? Must the in-home system utilize EEG and other direct measures of sleep microstructures? Per the ISO, the systems must be able to capture the information at a certain level of fidelity to the PSG-derived metrics and features. That doesn't mean you have to directly measure the EEG necessarily if your model, whether it's derived from a wearable or a nearable or other, is able to recapitulate the PSG-derived microstructures. So if you want to use if biochemical sensors are part of your solution, great. If they are able to compute the PSG-derived microstructures sufficiently or recapitulate them, great. We're open to whatever innovative solution you have. And are adolescents in scope? Yes. We do not have a restriction on adults only in this program. So proposers, you can define and justify the study population that you want to focus on and that you think will be most critical to solving the problems that REST is trying to address. And then lastly, may a REST solution summary that addresses TA1 and TA2 include an optional work package with a separate ROM for something else, for an independent set of work? No. Propose your project, don't propose your project and other optional work. And that is all for today. And those are the FAQs that we have for today. Please visit the website. We will be continuing to receive questions and we'll be updating those FAQs. The amendment has already been, or the ISO's already been amended 4 times, as Caitlin mentioned before. We're really good at amending the ISO as needed. So check back. if something's not clear to you, ask a question. We'll get it answered. If it requires an amendment to the ISO, we will amend the ISO to make it clearer in the ISO.
People?
Hello? Yes. So the newest amendment that came out, Amendment 4, the only change to that one was in the table that talks about how much cost share you have to have for TA1. So we had mistakenly put that it was 10% in phase 1 and 50% in phase 2 and NA in phase 3, and that was wrong. So it's not applicable in phase 1. You do not need cost share in phase 1 for TA1, but you need 10%, or you should be trying to get 10% in phase 2 and 50% in phase 3. So that's why you can't see that change, because I literally just scooted it over.
Thank you again. We are really, really excited to get this program off the ground and excited to see all the great ideas that you proposed to us. It's been a really invigorating, exciting day for me and the team, and can't wait to dig in and see all of your solutions on REST. Thank you.